Love after 60. If he shares these things, you're already his forever. When a mature man truly loves you, there are certain intimate things he'll share that he's never shared with anyone else. Sacred parts of his life that he only reveals when he sees you as his forever person. These aren't grand romantic gestures or obvious declarations of love. They're quiet, profound moments when he opens doors to his inner world that have remained locked to everyone else, including past wives and long-term partners. Recognizing these signs means understanding that you've already won his heart completely. Welcome back to Wise Advice for Elderly. Today, I'm going to reveal the specific things that mature men only share when they've decided you're the one they want to spend their remaining years with. These aren't about what he says. They're about what he reveals, what he trusts you with, and what sacred parts of himself he's willing to make vulnerable to you. When you understand these signs, you'll recognize the moment when you've moved from being someone he's dating to being the woman he can't imagine living without. This isn't about manipulating someone into sharing these things. It's about recognizing when someone has already chosen you as their life partner, even before they've said the words out loud. These revelations happen naturally when a man feels completely safe and sees you as his person. But first, if you're ready to understand the deepest signs of commitment and recognize when you've truly captured a mature man's heart forever, hit that subscribe button now. Here at Wise Advice for Elderly, we help you recognize genuine love and understand the profound ways that mature men express their deepest commitment.
Thing number 1. His deepest fears about aging and death. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." The first sacred thing a mature man shares when you're his forever person is his deepest fears about aging and mortality. Thoughts he's never voiced to anyone because they feel too vulnerable, too frightening, too intimate to trust with someone who might not stay. These conversations don't happen lightly. When a man over 60 shares his fears about becoming a burden, his concerns about losing his mental faculties, his worries about dying alone, or his anxiety about becoming physically dependent on others, he's trusting you with his most vulnerable thoughts about the future. Robert, 68, described when he knew Margaret was his person. "I found myself telling her about my father's decline with dementia and how terrified I was of going through the same thing. I'd never told anyone, not my ex-wife, not my children, not my closest friends, how much that fear haunted me. But with Margaret, I felt safe enough to voice those dark thoughts. When she listened without trying to fix it or dismiss it, just held space for my fear, I knew she was someone I could trust with my whole life." This sharing represents the deepest level of trust because these fears are about his ultimate vulnerabilities. He's essentially saying, "I trust you enough to see me at my most frightened and uncertain." When he shares concerns about his health, his mortality, his fears about becoming less capable, or his worries about how his life will end, he's inviting you into his most private emotional space. The profound significance is that he sees you as someone who will be there through these challenges, someone worthy of knowing his deepest anxieties because you're going to be part of facing them together. He's not just sharing fears, he's sharing the assumption that you'll be by his side through whatever comes.
Thing number 2. Stories about his childhood that shaped who he became. The second sacred sharing cuts even deeper than his fears about the future. It reaches back to the very foundation of who he is. When a mature man begins revealing the childhood stories that shaped his soul, he's not just sharing memories. He's handing you the secret map to his heart, showing you exactly how the man you love came to be. Carl Jung observed, Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But when someone trusts you with their childhood wounds and formative experiences, they're offering you something far more precious than understanding. They're giving you the ability to love them with complete knowledge of their deepest vulnerabilities. Picture the difference between the stories he might share at a dinner party, charming anecdotes about childhood adventures or amusing family tales, and the profound revelations he shares only with you. These sacred stories carry weight, pain, and meaning that he's protected for decades. The moment he trusted his first-grade teacher who betrayed his innocence. The father who left and never looked back, creating a wound that still aches when he thinks about abandonment. The mother whose critical words became the harsh inner voice he battles even now. Thomas, 69, knew Susan had become his forever person when I found myself sharing things I'd buried for decades. I told her how my mother's constant criticism made me feel like nothing I did was ever good enough, and how that voice still whispers doubts when I'm trying to be vulnerable with someone I love. I shared how being the youngest of 5 boys meant I had to fight for everything, attention, respect, even basic necessities, and how that shaped my need to prove myself over and over again. I told her about watching my parents' bitter, cold marriage and how it terrified me of commitment for most of my adult life, even though I craved the love I'd never seen modeled. These aren't just stories, they're the emotional DNA that created the man sitting beside you. When he reveals how his father's alcoholism taught him to be hyper-responsible, how his mother's depression made him feel responsible for everyone's happiness, how early betrayal made trust feel dangerous, he's showing you the experiences that built his emotional walls, his deepest fears, and his most tender places. The profound intimacy of these moments lies in their raw authenticity. These memories often carry shame, the shame of feeling unloved, unwanted, different, or damaged. They carry pain that has shaped decades of choices, relationships, and self-perception. When he trusts you with these tender spots, he's essentially saying, here are the places where I'm still that hurt child, still that confused boy, still carrying wounds that never fully healed. Will you love me anyway? This level of sharing represents the ultimate vulnerability, because childhood experiences are often where our deepest shame lives. The part of him that felt rejected by his father, the piece of his heart that broke when his parents divorced, the wound that formed when he realized the world wasn't safe or fair. These are the experiences that taught him how to survive, but also how to hide, how to protect himself, and sometimes how to love imperfectly. When he opens these sacred chambers of memory, he's not just sharing his past, he's explaining his present, why he needs so much reassurance in relationships, why certain words trigger disproportionate reactions, why he struggles with trust or intimacy or letting people get too close, why he approaches love with such caution or such hunger or such complex layers of hope and fear intertwined. The gift he's giving you is comprehension, the ability to understand not just what he does, but why he does it. When you know that his need for control stems from a childhood where everything felt chaotic and unsafe, you can respond to his controlling tendencies with compassion rather than resistance. When you understand that his difficulty expressing emotions comes from being told, "Big boys don't cry," you can create safer spaces for his feelings rather than taking his emotional distance personally. This sharing transforms your relationship from loving someone despite their imperfections to loving someone because you understand how those imperfections developed as survival mechanisms, protective strategies, and adaptive responses to experiences that would have broken a lesser spirit. You begin to see his emotional patterns not as flaws to fix, but as evidence of his resilience, his creativity in adapting to impossible circumstances, and his courage in surviving experiences that shaped him into the complex, beautiful, wounded, and wonderful man he became. When he trusts you with these foundational stories, he's not asking you to heal his childhood or fix his past. He's asking you to see him completely. The scared child and the strong man, the wounded boy and the wise elder, the imperfect human who carries both beautiful and broken pieces of his history in his heart. He's saying, "This is how I became me. Will you love all of it?"
Thing number 3, his regrets and the choices he wishes he'd made differently. The third sacred sharing may be the most emotionally devastating of all, the moment when he opens the locked chamber where he keeps his deepest regrets, his most painful what-ifs, and the decisions that still wake him at 3 a.m. with waves of remorse. These aren't simple mistakes or minor disappointments. These are the life choices that carved permanent grooves of sorrow in his heart. The paths not taken that haunt him with possibilities of who he might have been. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." But when a man truly loves you as his forever person, the weight of his past becomes so heavy that he must share it or risk being crushed by carrying it alone. He'll reveal his regrets not to burden you with his pain, but because he trusts you enough to witness his failures, his shame, his self-disappointment, and still choose to love him anyway. Picture the courage this requires. For decades, he's carried these regrets in silence, turning them over in private moments like stones worn smooth by constant handling. The father he wishes he'd been, but wasn't. The dreams he abandoned when life demanded practicality. The words he said in anger that can never be unsaid. The love he let slip away because he was too proud, too scared, or too foolish to fight for it. Patricia, 65, felt the earth shift when David began sharing his deepest regrets. Quote, "It started slowly, then became a flood of confessions I could tell had been dammed up inside him for years. He told me how he regretted working so much when his children were small, how he'd missed soccer games and school plays, chasing promotions that seemed important then but felt meaningless now. He shared how he'd let fear keep him from starting his own business, settling instead for the safety of a job that slowly suffocated his entrepreneurial spirit. Most painfully, he admitted how he'd handled his first marriage, how his pride had prevented him from getting counseling, how his emotional withdrawal had contributed to its failure, how he'd let ego destroy something that might have been saved with humility and effort. These aren't the kind of mistakes you laugh about later or learn from easily. These are the soul-deep regrets that reshape how a man sees himself, the moments when he fell short of his own moral code, when fear overruled love, when convenience trumped courage, when he chose the easy path instead of the right one. The parent he wishes he'd been more present for, the partner he wishes he'd fought harder to understand and forgive, the career risks he was too afraid to take, the creative pursuits he abandoned for security, the grudges he held too long, the apologies he never made. When he trusts you with these regrets, he's revealing the gap between who he wanted to be and who he actually was during his most crucial moments. He's showing you the places where he disappointed himself so deeply that the wounds never fully healed. The father who realizes he prioritized providing over connecting. The husband who wishes he'd learned to communicate before his silence destroyed his marriage. The son who regrets not spending more time with aging parents before it was too late. The profound vulnerability in these confessions lies in their permanence.
Unlike childhood wounds inflicted by others, these are self-inflicted injuries, choices he made that he can never unmake, words he spoke that echo forever in his memory, opportunities that will never come again. He's trusting you with his self-judgment, his disappointment in his own character, his awareness of how his decisions hurt people he loved. Patricia continued, "What broke my heart wasn't just his regrets, but the shame I could see in his eyes as he shared them. This wasn't a man asking for absolution or trying to excuse his choices. This was someone showing me his deepest wounds and waiting to see if I would love him less for having them. When he told me about missing his father's final months because work seemed more urgent, or how he'd let pride prevent him from reconciling with his brother before he died, I could see these weren't just regrets, they were permanent scars on his soul." This level of sharing represents the ultimate test of unconditional love. He's essentially laying his moral failures before you and asking, can you love a man who has fallen short of his own ideals? Can you choose someone who carries this much disappointment in himself? Will you still want to build a future with someone haunted by the ghosts of his past mistakes? The sacred trust involved is that he's revealing not just what happened, but how it changed him, how his regrets taught him what truly matters, how his failures humbled him into becoming a better man, how his mistakes created the wisdom and empathy that now make him capable of loving you more fully than he ever loved anyone before. When he shares these deepest regrets, he's not seeking your judgment or your solutions. He's seeking your witness, your acceptance, your love for the imperfect man he is, rather than the perfect man he wishes he had been. He's saying, I carry these wounds, and they're part of who I am now. Will you love me with these scars, or do they make me unworthy of the kind of love I found with you? The beauty of this sharing is that it often reveals how his regrets have transformed him. The father who regrets his absence becomes the grandfather who is fiercely present. The husband who regrets his emotional distance becomes the partner who fights for communication and connection. The man who regrets his cowardice becomes someone who chooses courage, especially in love. These regrets, as painful as they are, have carved out space in his heart for deeper compassion, greater wisdom, and more authentic love. When he trusts you with them, he's showing you not just his failures, but the profound capacity for growth, change, and redemption that those failures created in him.
Thing number 4. His dreams and hopes for the time he has left. The fourth sacred sharing may be the most tender of all, when he opens his heart to reveal the dreams he still carries, the hopes that light up his eyes when he thinks no one is looking, the secret aspirations he's almost afraid to voice because admitting them makes him vulnerable to disappointment. These aren't casual bucket list items. These are the deepest longings of his soul for the time he has remaining. Rumi wrote, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray." When a mature man begins sharing his most intimate dreams and hopes, he's not just revealing what matters to him. He's weaving you into the very fabric of his future because he can no longer imagine pursuing these dreams without you beside him. James, 67, felt his heart crack open when he heard himself telling Carol, "I found myself sharing dreams I'd kept locked away for years. How I still wanted to write about my military experiences, not for fame, but to honor the men I served with. How I dreamed of volunteering with veterans who were struggling, giving back to those who understood the weight I had carried. How I hoped to be the grandfather who really showed up, not just for holidays, but for the everyday moments that build lasting memories." These aren't the safe dreams he might mention in casual conversation. These are the vulnerable hopes that make him feel exposed, the creative projects he's always wanted to attempt, but feared he wasn't good enough for. The ways he wants to contribute to something larger than himself, the kind of man he still hopes to become, even at this late stage of life. The profound intimacy lies in how he includes you in these visions. When he shares his dream of traveling to places that hold meaning for him, he sees you discovering them together. When he talks about wanting to mentor younger people or contribute to his community, he envisions your support and partnership, making it possible. You're not just hearing about his dreams, you're woven into them as an essential part of what would make them meaningful. Thing number 5, his financial fears and security concerns. The final sacred sharing cuts to the bone of masculine identity when he reveals his financial fears and vulnerabilities. For men of his generation, financial security represents their ability to protect and provide. And admitting fear in this area feels like confessing failure as a man. Viktor Frankl observed, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." But when financial fears threaten to overwhelm the how of his remaining years, sharing these worries becomes an act of profound trust and vulnerability. William, 66, knew Linda had become his forever person when I started telling her things that kept me awake at night. My real fears about whether my savings would last, my terror of healthcare costs bankrupting me, my worry about becoming a burden to my children. These weren't conversations I could have with anyone else, because admitting financial fear felt like admitting I'd failed at being a man. When he shares these fears about long-term care, market crashes affecting his retirement, the possibility of outliving his money, or concerns about leaving debt instead of inheritance, he's sharing with you his deepest shame and vulnerability. He's revealing the fears that attack his sense of worth and adequacy as a provider and protector. The profound significance is that he's including you in his financial reality because he sees your futures as inseparably linked. He's not just sharing fears, he's inviting you to face whatever financial challenges might come as partners, trusting that you'll see him as worthy of love even when he feels financially vulnerable and afraid. Are you beginning to recognize these profound signs of ultimate trust and commitment? Leave a comment below about which sharing feels most significant to you.
When a mature man shares these 5 sacred things with you, his fears about aging and death, his formative childhood experiences, his deepest regrets, his remaining dreams and hopes, and his financial vulnerabilities, he's essentially placing his entire emotional life in your hands. These aren't casual conversations, they're acts of complete trust and vulnerability. Each sharing represents a different aspect of ultimate intimacy. His fears reveal his need for your comfort and support. His childhood stories give you the keys to understanding his heart. His regrets show you his human imperfections and need for acceptance. His dreams include you in his vision of meaning and purpose, and his financial concerns invite you into practical partnership for facing the future together. Why these matter more than words? While saying, "I love you," or even, "I want to marry you," are important, these intimate sharings represent something deeper. They show that he's already emotionally married to you in his heart. He's treating you as his life partner, his emotional safe harbor, his confidant, and his future companion. Eleanor, 64, recognized this with Mark. He never gave me a formal commitment speech, but when he started sharing these intimate parts of his life with me, I realized he'd already committed to me completely in his heart. The words came later, but the real commitment was in these moments of trust and vulnerability. When someone trusts you with these sacred sharings, it naturally creates space for you to share your own fears, stories, regrets, dreams, and concerns. This mutual vulnerability creates the deepest possible bond between two people, complete emotional intimacy based on total acceptance of each other's humanity.
Recognizing these sharings helps you understand the depth of his commitment without needing constant verbal reassurance. When someone trusts you with their deepest vulnerabilities, they've already decided you're their person. The formal commitments and future planning become natural next steps rather than uncertain possibilities. How to honor these sacred shares? When someone trusts you with these intimate revelations, the most important response is to receive them with love, acceptance, and protection. Don't try to fix, advise, or judge. Simply hold space for his vulnerability and show that your love for him includes all these imperfect, human, beautiful parts of who he is. When a mature man shares these 5 sacred things with you, you're not just dating anymore. You're already his chosen life partner in every way that matters emotionally. These intimate revelations represent the deepest possible trust and the clearest indication that he's chosen you as his forever person. Pay attention to these moments of sacred sharing because they reveal a love and commitment that goes beyond words. When someone trusts you with their fears, their history, their regrets, their dreams, and their vulnerabilities, they're giving you their heart completely and forever. If this video helped you recognize the profound signs of deep commitment and understand how mature love expresses itself through sacred sharing, make sure to subscribe to Wise Advice for Elderly and share this with someone who needs to understand these beautiful signs of lasting love. Let me know in the comments which type of sharing feels most meaningful to you, and remember, these intimate moments reveal a love deeper than any words could express. Remember, beautiful soul, when someone trusts you with the sacred parts of their life, they're telling you without words that you're their person forever. Honor these gifts of trust because they represent the deepest love possible between two people.